Thank you so much for this invitation. I will talk about the role of robots and automation technologies in the post-COVID tourism. Just a few highlights about me. I'm professor and vice rector research at Varna University of Management, which is a small private university in Bulgaria. I'm also a director of Zangador Research Institute, which is a private research organization in the country, and founder and editor-in-chief of two journals. One is the European Journal of Tourism Research, indexed in Scopus and Web of Science, and the other one, which was launched just one year ago, Robonomics, the Journal of the Automated Economy. This presentation will include 3 points: the current application of automation technologies in travel, tourism, and hospitality, just to put the technological context. Then I'll focus on the biosecurity as a driver of automation in the industry. And finally, using automation technologies for a physically distant service delivery. Now, what automation technologies do we currently have? Practically many things. Hotels use kiosks for automated check-in. These kiosks, they don't have artificial intelligence, but they are available 24/7 and save time for the tourists, and especially costs for hotels. Also, hotels can use digital receptionists. This digital receptionist was developed by a Bulgarian company, so I feel obliged promoting it. And also, hotels can use room service delivery robot. You see a picture of the first European hotel that started to use room service delivery robot. It is practically a Bulgarian hotel located in Sofia, Best Western Premier Sofia Airport. Restaurants, since many years, use table tablets for ordering digital menus. Fast food restaurants like McDonald's, they have kiosks where you can go, you can select, you can order, you can pay, and you can just go to the counter to take the order. Also, there are many restaurants that have conveyor belts, or some restaurants started to use social robots to entertain their guests. So the photo to the right is from Tanuki restaurant in Dubai. This is a robot host that the restaurant is using to attract guests in the restaurant and to entertain them while inside. Of course, restaurants can use also robots as waiters. At airports and other transport stations, we have biosecurity with we have security check with and boarding and automated boarding gates, like this photo from Gatwick Airport, or boarding or machines for issuing a boarding card. In museum and art galleries, we have robots as curators. We can have augmented reality, virtual reality, etc. Voice-activated devices are entering the hospitality industry, especially now with all these requirements for touchless devices. And of course, chatbots. If you go to the Facebook page of the large online travel agencies like Booking.com or Expedia, and to start communicating with them, practically you won't be communicating to a human, but to a chatbot. Last year, Istucidia published in Annals of Tourism Research one fantastic article regarding intelligent automation in tourism, where she presented all the products, technologies, and processes that can be implemented with these technological products in tourism. And if you haven't done this already, please read the article. What we have in tourism, these are different products like digital personal assistant, chatbots, autonomous vehicles, kiosks, virtual guides, etc., etc. Different technologies that stay behind this, like natural language generation, personalization engines, predictive analytics, etc. And all these technologies, they help tourist companies implement different processes like booking facilitation, channel marketing automation, or information search and evaluation, etc. Now, what happens with the COVID-19 pandemic? Biosecurity, for the moment, seems to be one of the major short-term drivers of automation. Demography is the long-term driver of automation, but biosecurity is the short-term within the last year and probably within the next couple of years. For more than two decades, researchers and consultants were advocating for digitalization of tourist companies. But it turns out that the COVID-19 pandemic was probably the main entity or the main thing that led to the digital transformation of companies. It wasn't the CEOs or the chief technology officers of companies. Practically, with the lockdowns, companies were forced to move to the digital space nearly overnight. When we evaluate the role of biosecurity for stimulating automation in tourism and evaluating the role of automation for mitigating the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, then we need to look at different directions. Most obvious is the relationship between biosecurity and automation through the mediating effect of health. But of course, we need to consider other aspects like marketing, finance, legislation, labor, and I'm pretty sure that there are other aspects that I have overlooked here. Most obvious, these are the health concerns. Chatbots, mobile, wearable, and implanted devices, they might be used to collect data about a person's health and inform guests and employees that the environment is safe and other people around them are not likely to be infected. Here, the role of automation technologies is collecting the data and presenting the data. Information, mostly related to information. Different technologies here, including smartwatches, which we usually many of us wear, smart lenses, different other things, etc. However, all these technologies, although they are fantastic, they raise one major concern, and this is about privacy, because they collect data, and this data is stored somewhere. And when data is collected and stored somewhere, it means that someone can utilize it. The question, there are many questions that arise. What would happen if, for example, insurance companies have access to such medical data, or if such data is leaked somewhere in the public internet domain. There might besides privacy, there are also some significant ethical concerns. But besides this, besides these obvious health issues, we have other things. From HR perspective, many employees in the post-COVID world, they may not want to go back to the employer that laid them off. What we saw last year was that tourism industry was the first to lay off employees. Large hotel corporations and large OTAs were the first to terminate the labor contracts of their employees when they, based on the booking forecasts for the coming weeks. And there were inevitable reputational losses. What we may see is that in the post-COVID world, many employees, they will probably not wish to go back to the same employers. Many of them, they may prefer to work in another industry, not in tourism, because they saw the vulnerability of tourism and hospitality to biosecurity pandemics and crisis. So this is especially valid, for example, in Bulgaria. What we saw is that many people who previous years were working in tourism, in 2020 they left tourism industry and they they found jobs in other industries. And this year they don't want to go back to tourism and hospitality because for more than a year they're working elsewhere. Why should they go back to a seasonal industry? Also, immigrant workers, they may not be able to obtain work visas easily, or they may be subject to compulsory quarantine. Or as Kayan said, in some countries you have very low level of vaccination. These people, they might not want to be vaccinated. And this, in the long term, this means, not even in the long, but even in the short term, within a couple of years, it means that the labor supply in tourism and hospitality may actually shrink in the post-viral world. So what will be the role of automation technologies? They will compensate for the lack of employees. So they will not be replacing the employees that are currently working in the industry, but they will be compensating for the employees that do not want to work in the industry. And they will compensate for the insufficient labor supply. Regarding social responsibility, again from marketing perspective, COVID-19 challenged the corporate social responsibility claims of many travel, tourism, hospitality companies, because large corporations in tourism, they have on their websites how much they care about employees and about customers, etc. But they were the first ones to cancel, to terminate the labor contracts of their employees. Inevitable reputation losses. But companies that use automation technologies, and this is the role of automation technologies here, the automation technologies, they're a way to minimize the dependence on human labor and potential layoffs and negative word of mouth. Again, from a marketing, but also from a strategic management perspective, automation technologies, they provide an additional source of competitive advantage for tourist companies in the post-viral tourism, moving from high-touch to high-tech services. Of course, this is not compulsory. We shall have more than 50 shades of gray between high-tech and high-touch companies, and not all of them should adopt automation technologies. Companies need to consider what is their positioning, the target market, etc. From a financial perspective, what's the role of automation technologies? The COVID-19 pandemic would force owners and managers of the surviving companies to search more aggressively to decrease their fixed costs. Before the pandemic, many owners were obsessed with decreasing costs. But after the pandemic, they will be even more aggressive, but especially for the fixed costs. And automation technologies, they allow companies to work with fewer employees, which means they will decrease their labor costs and their fixed costs. But also from an accounting perspective, automation technologies, they decrease the cash outflows of the company and help the company remain liquid in case of in case of closures or something like this. From a legal perspective, automation companies that have high level of automation, they do not need to deal with rigid labor laws and negative publicity when they fire employees during a pandemic. The labor legislation in many countries is quite rigid. Hiring is relatively easy, but firing employees is very difficult because this is a way that governments try to create to keep people employed. But with automation technologies, how do you fire a robot? You just turn it off, or you terminate the contract with the company where you rent it from. Simple. Again, from a legal perspective, legislation in the post-viral world may force companies to consider the use of biometric technologies for measuring health status of employees and tourists in real time. But this means that companies will be forced to use technologies, not because they want it, not because they don't have employees, but because it's a government requirement. And if you have this, the implementation of this technology will mean costs for them. Also, legislation may require that they decrease the service capacity, fewer seats, fewer guests in hotels, fewer passengers in airplanes. We saw these requirements during the pandemic. Probably some of them will continue to exist for a year or so. And but when you decrease the service capacity, this means that you increase the costs to serve guests because you distribute the fixed costs among fewer guests, which means that you create stimuli for companies to automate in order to decrease the costs. So some examples of technologies that could be implemented are biometrics for measuring the temperature. So this is a sexy photo of me in a hotel just 25 kilometers north from where I'm currently located. Before entering the hotel, you have to your temperature needs to be measured, and if it is above specific temperature, you cannot enter. We can have robots for disinfection with ultraviolet light, but of course, the employees and the tourists should not be in the room because their DNA will suffer. We can have automation technologies for enforcing physical distancing with delivery robot, but also to facilitate social connectivity. Finally, we can have avatar tourism, so that instead of someone traveling abroad, the person can, because the person is not vaccinated, because of travel bans or whatever, the person can connect to a robot and experience the destination. Of course, this will require much fast internet than we currently have, but this is possible. Finally, just a couple of minutes on using automation technologies for a physically distant service delivery system. Based on these two articles in Current Issues in Tourism and International Journal of Hospitality Management that I wrote last year with Faruk Seitoğlu, what we argue, Faruk and I argue, is that companies will need to introduce physically distant services. Of course, not compulsory, but highly recommended. And the decision how to organize this will be based on analysis of demand, the situational analysis, the positioning of the company. And the company will need to choose between three types of service delivery mode: robotic service delivery, which is completely automated with all the processes in the front of house operations can be automated, and a human-based service delivery system where the front of house operations are implemented by humans, but the back of house operations can be automated. And we argue then the mixed service delivery system, where you have human-robot collaboration in the service delivery, is probably the optimal, and this is what we are going to see more and more widely implemented. These services will appeal to different tourists. What, in a nutshell, in one sentence, to summarize the whole presentation is that biosecurity stimulates automation, but it is the economics that makes it feasible. So final slide for shameless self-promotion of the book on robots, artificial intelligence, and service automation in travel, tourism, and hospitality. The reaction of people when they see the book, the reaction of robots when they see human writing about them. Some references. Thank you for the attention, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.